students, attachments. But then after that, everything slowed down. And then now we have a problem with our workers in Singapore.
Hi, Vishal.
Hey, Ashok.
Hi. So we have...
I can see a lot of our panelists are here. Welcome, John. Welcome, Prof. Yong. Thank you so much for sparing time. Dr. Vispi, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you guys. Hi.
Hi. Dr. Yong is here from the Ground Zero, China. We have Dr. Srivastava from one of the biggest hospital in Mumbai. We have Dr. Arvind Goregaonkar from another very, very big hospital, Sion Hospital in Mumbai. And we have Dr. Supe soon going to join us. We have Dr. Ignacio. Welcome, Dr. Ignacio. And we have none other than the president himself from Association of Spine Surgeons of India, Dr. Chabra. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for sparing your time. We'll be starting sharp at 4. These 15 minutes we have just kept in to warm up so that the glitches of online zooming in and getting inside can be overtaken. We have plenty of panelists coming and joining us today. And me, Dr. Abhay and Dr. Ramchadda are going to be the guilty kids for you all to trouble you with our questions today. And we are going to have many, many questions that we have in our mind on behalf of all the delegates that are going to watch around in the country and around.
Good afternoon, friends. Any questions that you may have about this particular next 2 hours that we've planned? Dr. John, Dr. Vispi, Dr. Chabra, Dr. Yon, you are all new guests to this particular meeting. So any questions you may have about this meeting? I'm Ram Chadda.
Are we going to have a break in between the 2 hours session?
Well, each one of us will have a break. Vishal Kundnani is the guy who will keep talking. So we would get enough respite. So please don't worry. Vishal is the guy who's going to be running the show with Abhay Nene. So the two of them would be running the show. Whatever questions come to us, we'd be happy to answer. And the rest of the time, we are all ears because there is no real evidence that we have. It's all expertise and experience that is being shared right now. The evidence is scanty, few, and very, very short duration. So that's where we are.
John, hi. How have you been?
Hi, Abhi. I'm good.
I'm good.
You've been working?
I'm good.
Have you been working?
Yeah. You're working a lot.
Oh, Yong, hi. Prof is here.
Yes, we are almost back to normal now. I just came back from the hospital.
Ooh.
So
Big
China,
boys are making
parts
the big
of China
bucks.
are back to normal, which is good. It's very optimistic. We are happy to hear that. Yep. Very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Prof Yong Hai is in Beijing, and Beijing was not affected as much, isn't it, Prof?
Dr. Vispi Joki Homi is an orthopedic surgeon like us, but he's also heading a very good hospital called Masina Hospital in Mumbai. So he's both an administrator and an orthopedic surgeon. Dr. Chabra, of course, runs the largest spine specialty center in our country. And these are two guys we're looking forward to for their inputs as far as being administrators as well as surgeons. And then we have heads of departments of 2 orthopedic hospitals in Bombay, Dr. Srivastava from KM Hospital and Dr. Goregaonkar from Sion Hospital. So we have huge experience and we are all ears. Abhay and Vishal, all the best. You guys can begin your talking.
Very soon, sir. Very soon.
Ashok Sham is the man who's handling it behind the scenes. He's the wizard who's actually got all of us connected. And he's working on the Zoom platform. Ashok, are you there with us?
Yes, I am here. Me
Ashok,
and Sai are handling it.
What are these apprehensions about the Zoom platform that people are talking right now?
I think as it's mostly about the competitors, but I don't have much apprehension as this has been used by the US legal system openly all over the place. Most of the legal system are using it. Certain things like defense department or other departments shouldn't have used this to begin with. So that there lies my thing. It's pretty safe, nothing to worry about. And we take all safety measures here on this arranging these meetings, so no issues.
We are going to be very, very safe. Professor Ignacio is seated in the church right now. So we have nothing to worry.
Jose, you got God with you.
So we wanted some expert opinion. So he might as well summon Jesus to come over and speak upon us.
Hi, Gabriel. I briefly saw you, Gabriel. Welcome.
Yeah, Gabriel came in and disappeared. Yes. Hi, Gabriel. How are
Gabriel,
you?
welcome. Welcome, Gabriel. Your voice, Gabriel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Hope everybody is safe over there.
Yes.
Vishal, if you could just brief the international faculty and the local faculty as to how we are going forward, it will be easier
Yes.
for them.
Yes. Before we proceed, let me just brief it to you. Why did we start all this? I mean, why is this whole thing working in India on this level when we have so much already in the world speaking on it? We all know India is a completely different demographic domain. It's a completely different set of population, completely different set of people. The fortunate part is that India has been stuck with this problem little later in the natural course. The unfortunate part is that despite being late, we are yet to learn from our colleagues, from our mentors, and from our friends around the world. Unfortunately, despite having a huge infliction on the health system, we still have no protocols laid down for what to do and what not to do today, at least for a country like India, which constitutes 1/6 of the world's population already. At the same time, we are in a lockdown, so we exactly don't know how to deal with situations at this point in time. 1 lakh plus super specialists who have been doing only elective surgery for last many years are now jobless, workless, and they have no clue what is in store for them after the lockdown is over. After the lockdown is over, how to get prepared today, or shall we just wait for the day to come and then see as the day passes by? So this webinar is purely meant to come up to some conclusions, basically suggestions to learn from the experiences of our colleagues, of our friends who have had really tough days in Ground Zero China, in Philippines who are still in the state of recovering, and in Singapore where the story can easily be called a success model. We also have panelists from UK who are badly stuck. We also have guys like Dr. Rajiv Sethi joining us from USA to tell us what is happening there in current scenario and how are they looking forward to the future. And we hope that from all these experiences, and also with the ideas coming up from the brains that we have with us, like Dr. Chhabra, Dr. Goregaonkar, Dr. Vispi, Dr. Srivastava, who really had some of the institutions, maybe we can just come up to some suggestions which we all, the orthopedicians involved into subspecialty care, elective work, more than anything, in the coming days post-lockdown, we can learn from it. Moreover, the concern is, today we are following a forced lockdown where social distancing is forced on us. Tomorrow situation may not be same. When lockdown is over, we will have an overwhelmed population of patients who will be eager to jump into these hospitals. The concerns of how to keep social distancing alive and the whole responsibility will then belong to the healthcare providers. Dr. Srivastava, Dr. Chhabra, Dr. Goregaonkar probably will see the largest number of patients coming in, and so the responsibility on their head is going to be magnanimous on how to keep the chain of transmission blocked so that the number of patients we see with COVID positive inflictions are kept to bare minimum. At the same time, these are also the institutes where the largest number of doctors in one institute are working. And we know the Spain story. We don't want to see the Italy again happening in India. On one hand, we have corporate hospitals, government hospitals, where a large manpower force is working with a lot of financial backing to them from government and private sector. On the other hand, we have a mortal variant of nursing homes, single doctor occupant nursing homes, single doctor run clinics, which still serve the 70% of Indian population. who are already plummeting in their revenues, who are already at the verge of closure. Today, 80% of the workload has gone down. And I'm sure the future is bleak even more. After the lockdown is over, the trust of patients is still not in the best of interests. The patients are already not in the mood to travel to hospitals. What is going to happen to these doctors? How are we going to make situations better? What workflow are we going to come up with? What is the workflow that is happening in the best places like Singapore, in US, where elective surgeries have already started? What is the work practices that we should change in from now? What are the preparedness that a hospital should do? What level of preparedness a single doctor should do? And what kind of safety precautions should we as doctors individually do? What are the precautions that we must take when we are operating upon these emergency patients? And what are the situations when we see a COVID negative patient versus a COVID positive patient? Is the time ripe enough to redefine the emergency surgeries? Is the time come that we are now going to stop elective surgeries completely? Or shall we get prepared? Shall we get armed? Shall we get forewarned about the elective surgeries coming up after the lockdown is over in our country? With many such questions, let me begin the webinar today. And let me, to begin with, invite all my panelists here. We have a full system of brains, experienced guys from ground zero with us. May I call upon Dr. Abhay Nene to please welcome all the panelists that we have today with us. Dr. Abhay, over to you. Say your voice. Dr. Abhay.
We have some very special guests here, and we're very honored to have all of them taken out time and come to be spend time with us and exchange experiences. These guys gain nothing from us, and we're going to gain everything from them. So thank you again for coming here. I think in order of seniority, if I've got it right, Dr. Yong Hai, who's a professor, a big spine surgeon, does a lot of deformity surgery. He's based out of Beijing, a very, very busy guy. Jose Ignacio from Manila, who's again the face of Philippines as far as spine surgery is concerned. And he's been through the whole, the whole rigmarole. Dr. John Chen, a very close friend who heads the spine surgery department in the Singapore General Hospital. He's a rock star in his own right. And then Gabriel Lu, who's one of the most popular surgeons from Singapore in India. Everybody loves Gabriel, and Gabriel loves everybody. Gabriel is currently heading, I'm going to say, the spine unit in National Health Institute of National Health University of Singapore. So these are our four foreign guests that have consented to come and share their experience. And of course, we have Professor Goregaonkar and Professor Srivastava, Professor Chabra, like you introduced, and of course, my lovely wife Amita, who's a chest physician, who's working in the COVID ICU in Bombay Hospital. So she'll have a lot of brain to contribute, along with Dr. Praveen Amin, who's going to join us, who's the intensivist in charge at Bombay's biggest hospital, that's Bombay Hospital. Over to you, Vishal.
So may I have asked Ashok to please allow me to share the screens from here. We also are going to be joined by Dr. Avinash Supe and Dr. Vispi is here with us, who are the hospital administrators. They are going to tell us about what kind of preparedness they have been into and what kind of preparedness we should be getting ready with. We also have some freelancers with us. Dr. Samir Dalvi leading the game from there. Not to introduce Dr. Vivek Trika from AIIMS is joining us. He's got some wonderful ideas about how post-lockdown OPD measures in a country like India, which is loaded with patients otherwise, should ensure, and what protocol should be followed in OPD. We are going to listen from Dr. Vivek Trika. And of course, we have Dr. Vispi Joki, who's going to tell us about what level of preparedness currently India is into when it comes to hospitals, and what should we learn and how should we go ahead to make things safe from here. We also have a small bunch of nursing home owners who are at the branch, who are probably suffering a lot currently because they are their own finances. We have Dr. Saraf from Bihar. We have also Dr. Tushar Agarwal, who's a nursing home owner in Bombay. We're going to soon be joined by many more guys here. And just to keep you all updated, we are in a situation where we are going to see 5,000 plus delegates today joining us in this co-orthopedics part 2. Just to keep you all informed, this is part 2 of the whole sequence of webinars that are going to come up. These webinars are happening in 3 parts. We did the first one on Monday, where we discussed few aspects about current scenario, the impact of COVID on healthcare, the future impact that COVID is going to have on orthopedic practice, and also the burden that we are carrying with now. How should we get ready with emergency care? And just to set the background right, we all know that today in COVID pandemic, the first thing that has been instructed to all of us is to please stop all elective work. The answers to these we never knew. However, it is assumed that by doing so, we are able to break the transmission chain. We are able to conserve resources so that the beds, ICU, PPE, manpower can all be conserved. And the most important thing, we don't want to see more of Spain, more of Italy, more of Bhilwara, where more than 10% of healthcare workers were infected already. And by doing elective work, we don't want to really break down the healthcare workers, which is the backbone of healthcare services in country. And that's the whole reason why we should contain and do not do elective work today. We are in a lockdown and we are supposed to conserve resources. And this word comes from Italian spine surgeon, Dr. Jan Chen just shared this slide with me this morning, and I went through it and I was really moved by the words of the Italian spine surgeon who just said, it was a mistake to think that Italy cannot happen to us or China cannot happen to Italy. We should be proactive rather than reactive. And at this point, we should not be orthopedic surgeons, spine surgeons or specialists. We should just be healthcare providers. And that's why it's very important that we keep staying healthy. The need is clear. However, the impact is bigger. Today, in morning, we saw an article coming up by Rui Kankani. Will India be able to save hospitals before we really save India? If we say on one hand that healthcare providers are the backbone, are we not already breaking the backbone for the health of India? 80% reduced admissions. Mayo Clinic has already come up with 1.6 billion loss in the last quarter. 80% doctors in US have forfeited their salary already. Their revenues are plummeting. And the biggest risk is today on the nursing homes, which cater to 70% of the elective work in India. Forget about single doctor clinics. Forget about the fee for service consultants. The future is not so good. Though we have to get ready. Dr. Raj Shekhan yesterday mentioned that life will never be normal. The new normal will only be established. However, the life will slowly crawl and I will have gentle steps to take while we wait and get into the normal. We all know that work has to start. Emergency cases will have to be done now also. However, OPD and semi-elective cases are supposed to be done. We have to keep safety as our paramount. Zero infection is the only acceptable limit for healthcare workers in particular. Use the resources efficiently if today we are delivering any healthcare services. We already see NHS and ACS giving guidelines for elective surgeries. That means something is already moving ahead. And we all have to move in this tide, keeping safety and also the protocols in picture. Unfortunately, like Dr. Bhandari yesterday mentioned in his webinar, we have no protocols at this point in time, but plenty of opinions, mostly subjective. 300,000 plus publications, mostly based on personal opinions, absolutely nothing based on controlled trials. And in last 3 months, 3,000 publications, you can understand what is the level of publication that is going to come across. Unfortunately, none in India, from India, or for India. There are no protocols and guidelines regarding what should we do as doctors, freelancers? What should we do as government service providers, administrators, regulators? Are there any protocols already laid down? Can we learn from our guides? Can we learn from people around? These are some summaries that we came across in the first part of COVID, orthopedics, that implications and burdens are massive. Policy makers are stumped already. However, they're working to their best possible. Elective cases are to be suspended. The current scenario is really overwhelmed. Only emergency cases are to be performed. Safety of the healthcare is paramount. There are ways and means of it. Only emergency surgeries have to be done. Negative pressure OT is ideal. PPE, donning and doffing protocols were discussed last time. All healthcare workers shall be in level 3 PPE. And the most important thing is, unless proven otherwise, all the patients have to be taken, considered, and monitored and managed like a COVID positive patient. And today, part 2, we are going to have questions like, how do we work with Corona post-lockdown? How do we learn from our colleagues around? We are going to soon listen to China, Singapore, Australia, USA, and UK. Work with protocol, war with Corona, work with Corona. All these protocols and much more today with our panelists around. And may I just call upon guys around to help us lay down these guidelines with my first question to our ground zero experience guys, Professor Yongzai. Sir, Dr. Professor Yongzai, can you help us understand how has China, we just heard a good news coming from you that you're already moving towards normal. How did it started inflicting, and at what point you started feeling that things are getting better, and where do we stand today? Professor Yongzai.
Dr. Yonghai, that's for you. Yonghai, can you hear me? Professor Yonghai.
So meanwhile, can we have Philippine Dr. Ignacio coming in, please? Also share his experience, Dr. Ignacio.
Yeah, actually, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, I think we're a few weeks ahead of India. For the Bombay course, when I came over there, the plane was empty from Manila to Singapore. Singapore to India was business as normal. So we were already feeling the sense of impending doom in the Philippines before it started. So I think we were one of the earlier countries to institute a lockdown, at least for the population. But whether it's very effective or not, or it's being carried out or not, it's a question. So let's go by hospitals. I work in 3 different hospitals, 2 private and 1, the biggest government hospital, where we cater to the more or less indigent patients. So the hospitals, the first thing that hospitals did was to create the tents outside. I think you already have this in most hospitals where we see the COVID suspects. And in the hospitals, we made sure that ingress and egress, entry and exit were always separate. Nobody when you go in one side, you exit another part of the hospital, so there will be no contact. In some of the hospitals, before a patient is seen, the patient has to actually don PPE to protect the workers inside. But I don't know if this is still being carried out now. And like you said, everyone is going to be suspect. Now, one hospital I go to is a training hospital, so that puts an additional burden to the residents. We have to continue training them, and since that hospital is now a full COVID hospital, then our residents will have problems taking care of their training. So we're trying to do online courses with them. We don't know how things will do. We're talking to the board, orthopedic board, to give leniency to these doctors for exams, for cases they need to do. So we're trying to do a lot of online work. And by doctors, we subdivide the department into different categories. The young and those without comorbids are placed in the list of those rotating and meeting patients. Those who are above 60 or with comorbids are put as reserve forces. And the procedures, all electives are canceled. Emergencies, no question, they have to be done. Now, there is a question of whether we need to do, there are in-between cases, which actually the chairman of one of my hospitals has a problem dictating to the rest of the staff, maybe you better not do this. Or so what he did was to form a committee. This committee is composed of more senior members, not a big group, 3 doctors to help him decide whether they will continue with the surgery or delay the surgery. And these 3 members, senior members, will then, if they need to get more input from other specialists, they do this. So that relieves that doctor of the burden. And in my government hospital, the PPEs are actually limited, and so the different chairmen are actually doing their own. They try. I try to look for donors. We try to get PPEs, hazmat suits for our residents, so that we will not have to follow the hospital policy on what to do. We always tell the resident, if we can level up, we level up with all our with donning our protective suits. So, and then we're looking at we're looking at group practice, but it doesn't work. It didn't quite work out with the orthopedic group, but many of the subspecialties are doing group practice now in their hospitals, because the problem is we go to many hospitals, so that's difficult, because we want one group to go on duty for 1 week and off for 2 weeks and something like that. So if you're a group, you can do that, and that might be a way around it. It hasn't taken off in my hospitals, but in
Jose,
the
at the
government
peak of your problem, Jose, can you hear me, Jose? This is Abhay.
I can. Yeah.
At the peak of the problem, when the cases were at its maximum load, you as a senior spine surgeon, what exactly was your role when the problem was at its peak?
Well, actually, I wouldn't say we're past the peak. We're still there. We are more or less still at the administrative stage. We're formulating, and we're raising funds to get our residents protected. We get them extra suits, etc. So not
So you're still preparing for the worst. You've not been to the worst. You're still preparing for the worst, unlike New York. Can we have Yong Hai? Yeah. Professor Yong Hai, have you seen the worst in China? When in your practice, have you had to face the worst case scenario where, as a spine surgeon, you were called upon to turn patients or do ABGs, etc.?
Yes, the worst place in China is in Beijing, is in Wuhan. But in Beijing, we also have a pretty bad situation at the early February. And for those, the Beijing government, they shut down the city. They assigned the quite amount of the hospital to deal with the COVID patients. And for the large hospital like us, we are not accepting diagnosis COVID patient because they want to save the health resource for prepare for the worst scenario. So for our hospital, there's a special building called the fever clinic and the infection disease building. All the patients come into the entrance of the hospital will get temperature checked. And once there's any abnormal temperature, the patient will advise to the fever clinic. And all the people working in the fever clinic, all the medical workers are well protected. We also purchased a portable CT scan to put in the outside. So the fever patient or suspect patient will have a CT scan for the chest and CT scan, not in the main building. The hospital assigned a special group of people to working in the fever clinic and a suspected area. Also for the surgery, and all the elective surgery has stopped at the first 2 weeks, and then we continue again with several measures. The first, the patient has to test the PCR before they had a surgery. And also they has to take a chest CT to see there's any problem with the lung. And once they are cleared, they will admit into a special building, an isolated building we call the buffer ward. All the patients will stay in the room, single or double occupancy, and to check PCR twice again. So if the patient, they are clear, they can do the elective surgery, because the doctors, nurses work in the normal building are not working in the infection. So there's isolation between those two buildings. What if the patient has diagnosis with the COVID-19 and need emergency surgery? We have a special pathway to send the patient to the OR. The OR is negative pressure OR with well-protected anesthesiologists and the surgeons. For the clinic, we didn't stop the clinic. All the doctor goes to the clinic will be the mask, eyeglass, and also the hat, well glove, and clean your hand. So the patient they did twice temperature taking. First, enter the building, and then enter the waiting area. So though you can prevent any incidental problems. The PCR in China in our hospital, at first we had a result in 6 hours. Now we can have that in 1 hour. So that make clear. So
Fantastic.
the
So,
surgery right
Yong Hai, as you say, there was one entrance, there was one isolation building to screen patients who were coming up into the clean building, and they would wait there, get 2 PCR tests done, and if both were negative, they would then be allowed to what we call the clean building where elective surgery happens.
yes, yes.
And what
So
was the duration
we call
between the two?
the building is a buffer building. The building, all the medical workers also protect the well in that building. But
Right.
for
Was
us,
there,
one of many nurses and a junior doctor in our department support in the clinic or in the isolated building to treat the patient, because Beijing is a very large city. The patient, they still get well, get ill, they come to the hospital. So far, because the hospital is very free of there's any patient diagnosis in the OR, because the Chinese government have a regulation. Every patient diagnosis, all the person has been in contact with the patient for the last 48 hours should be quarantined, and that will cause a lot of trouble. So we do the very careful screening and the protection.
right. John Chen from Singapore, you're in a similar environment where you have multiple buildings at your disposal. Have you created a similar scenario of a entry building, a buffer building, and a clean building in your setup at Singapore General?
So we were very fortunate because in our early experience, we had very few cases of COVID coming in because of very early detection and very rapid isolation. And this happened for a few weeks. But now recently we've had this big wave, and our country just went into lockdown just a week plus ago. So we're now having an exponential increase in numbers. We have not yet started any elective surgeries. We've cut down all our surgeries, and we are preparing for a real uptick of cases. And we don't have separate buildings for COVID, but we have separate hospitals where most of these patients with COVID are sent to. We also have patients in our hospital with COVID, which are treated in a separate wards. In fact, our orthopedic, we are very fortunate because our orthopedic unit has shifted to a new building, actually a community hospital, which is just adjacent to us. We've just shifted there. So we are very separate now from our hospital, which is slowly turning into a fever hospital. That is, patients who are coming with fever and not confirmed with COVID. The moment they are confirmed with COVID, they are then sent to another block in the hospital, another ward, and isolated. So we have not operated any patients with COVID, but I think coming in the future, we may have to consider screening our patients for COVID, just like Dr. Yong Hai does in China. The question is screening. We don't have a screening tool except for the nasal swab test, the PCR test.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Juan. I think we are in a very different scenario in India, where neither rapid testing, which gives results within less than 6 hours, are available, nor we in most setups, if not all, I would say 80% of people are only amenable to reach a setup which has only one building. So for that situation, we'll probably have a difficulty in organizing things. Let me catch upon one of our hospital administrator, Dr. Vispi. Dr. Vispi, you also work, you are administrator of a hospital where again you have a couple of blocks there. How do you see your preparedness from here, say post-lockdown, when we are overwhelmed with many patients? Will we be able to have very similar kind of structure, or how do you see it? How do you would want to modify it, where a separate entry, then a buffer zone, a COVID zone, and then a isolation zone and a clean zone where elective surgeries can happen? Or you still foresee that elective surgeries are not a way for coming many, many months? Dr. Vispi. Dr. Vispi, your voice, please. Yeah, you'll have to unmute.
Yeah. Okay. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to be part of this seminar, this webinar. Basically, we are still in the early stages, and the challenge which is being faced, I mean, you all are talking of the post-lockdown scenario. I'm actually worried about what's happening now. And the enormity of what is happening is still not going into the manpower which is working in my hospital. That is my bigger challenge. While I have completely understood the fact that we need to create isolation and we need to create separate entry and ingress for infected patients and separate the non-infected patients from the infected in some manner, whichever is feasible. My hospital being a very old hospital, we always had a problem that multiple buildings were a problem for us because we found it difficult operationally. But today it is proving to be a boon because we have multiple buildings and therefore we can keep certain buildings of the hospital separate. It's not a very large setup, but we have at least this possibility. And at this, even as the pandemic started coming in, I had already identified areas in which I would create the isolation facility. Also, I have ordered porta cabins, which are available, which are going to get ready in a couple of days, wherein I would keep the few COVID positive patients which I would have in my hospital separately. At the moment, the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai policy is not very clear. In the beginning, they told the private hospitals that you need to start isolation units. And then in between, there was a kind of a direction where they said that asymptomatic and suspect patients should not be kept in hospitals in the private setup because they would like to keep all the COVID patients in only certain hospitals in the city of Mumbai. However, on the other hand, they did tell us that we would need to give support in terms of ventilator beds and give critical care. If I were to give critical care to COVID positive patients, I need to create all the tiers, including a tier where I would have patients which are suspected COVID, which I need to keep separate, like a holding area or a triage area in which I will see the patients, and when they're clear, get them back into the system and allow them to do the emergency work. The biggest challenge which we are facing is also in terms of labor. The patients who come with, we have a very robust and a strong gynec departments, and we are in a Muslim locality where there's a lot of patients who are coming for deliveries. They register in the hospital and they come without testing. While we have tried to exhort everyone to get themselves tested in 2 weeks from the time of delivery, that window period is not sufficient to be sure that any patient who comes in with or without testing is not infected. So therefore, we have within the hospital created a labor room which is separate, where all the staff which is treating these patients without testing is protected with PPE, and the patients are also kept isolated so that my staff doesn't get quarantined in case someone tests positive later, and therefore the patient our staff has become a contact patient. So there are a lot of issues which are facing us. As far as fracture cases are concerned, orthopedic cases are concerned, patients are at the moment coming to the hospital and we are keeping them in the triage area. We have instituted a kind of a video calling session, so orthopedic surgeons need not actually go inside and take a round. The physicians also are virtually, treating the patients without actually going inside, whereas the residents take care of the triage. These are asymptomatic patients who are not tested. These are the ones which we are keeping. And once they are tested and we get a COVID negative, we are taking them into the hospital areas and treating them as normal patients. But how many swabs you require to confirm that they are normal or they are not infective is still a matter of conjecture, because in our country, there are regulations still to decide who is allowed to do a test. We are not allowed to do the test randomly for everybody. And if we write that the patient is asymptomatic, then actually by the present regulations of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, we are not allowed to take a COVID testing. However, we are doing COVID testing in the interest of the staff and the protection of my hospital and the other patients in the hospital.
Right. Thank you, Dr.
More or less what we are doing at this point of time.
And
we are
what do you
hoping that the
foresee,
disease comes
Dr.
under
Vispi?
control.
What do you
Hello?
foresee? What do you foresee from here, Dr. Vispi? Where are we heading? I mean, post-lockdown?
I think if the government efforts to contain the disease succeed, I'm seeing the positive things which are happening in the state of Kerala. So maybe if we can get something on that lines in this city, then, and we don't go to that stage where everything goes haywire, I hope we can get back to recovery faster than what other countries have landed up in. That's my only hope. But it's more in the nature of hope than conviction. I see very difficult industry. I see very, very difficult times, especially for charitable trust hospitals like ours, where we find it difficult to make ends meet even in normal times, and to make the staff motivated to work in these difficult times in the era of WhatsApp misinformation, where even doctors are not able to understand that it is possible to work safely in an environment like this and be free from infection by using PPEs judiciously. I get irrational demands for PPEs from staff who are working in areas which are completely risk-free. For example, in the mental health department, there are people just doing counseling, and they can easily keep a simple barrier between the patient and the person, but they refuse to come to work saying that we are afraid that we'll get infected. So there are a lot of challenges. At the moment, I'm more concentrating on the challenges we are facing now. I do think about the future, but at this point of time, the problem now itself is taking a lot of my time, and that's the way things are. Thank
you, Dr. Vispi. Yes, we'll get back to you again. Please stay with us. Dr. Chhabra, may I come back to you? Dr. Chhabra, you also run a big institute with multiple buildings here. Do you foresee that elective surgeries are soon going to come in, or you still see that despite having separate buildings, isolation wards, it's going to be a matter of future?
No, Vishal, one thing I'd want to point out that we still need to see how things progress. But if we were to listen to the experts, what the lockdown does is not suppress the epidemic curve. It only flattens the epidemic curve. So what it does is it gives you more time to prepare yourself. It gives you more time that you get ready with all the protocols and management strategies. And then the health infrastructure doesn't suddenly get loaded with people. They get distributed over time. So I don't think we should expect a miracle to happen from the lockdown, right? What I expect is that this disease is going to be here to stay. And for things to get normal, you have to either get a herd immunity wherein you need to have at least 60% of the population of India infected and then getting the immunity, or you need to develop a vaccine or a treatment for the disease, all of which will take time. So we need to prepare ourselves how we need to go forward to meet this big challenge which is going to be here. Which way India goes, if it goes the way Italy, Spain, US does, God save us, because of the huge population. And one of the epidemiologists said by June or July, we are going to have 12 lakh deaths in India. So we are still at the start of the epidemic curve. We have to see how things go, and we have to evaluate things. But we have to be ready for a big war ahead, a big challenge ahead, and we have to prepare for the worst and be ready for it. So we have been talking a lot about surgeries. As orthopedic surgeons, it is natural that we are concerned only about surgeries. But is it the surgery only which matters? From the published study which was done amongst orthopedic surgeons in China, the main cause of the infection, the main source from that where people got infected was not the operation theater. The orthopedic surgeons, 80% of them got infected in the wards, and up to 20% of them got infected in the social areas. It was only 12.5%, if I remember correctly, who got infected in the operation theater, 4.2% in the intensive care unit. So aren't we trying to put too much focus on the operation theater, whereas the strategy may need to be try to prevent in the ward where you meet the patient? So you need to have strategies planned accordingly. So,
Dr. Chabra, is it not true that deaths in an OT or due to an OT are almost 20% when you know, a COVID-sensitive patient has been taken in? The mortality of surgery is significantly higher. Is that not true?
So, see, Abhay, mortality depends on the percentage. Mortality has differed across nations. Why has it differed across nations? Why is it so low in Germany? Why is it so high in Italy, France? It may not be because the number of people who die there are more than the number of people who die in Italy. Germany has been aggressive in doing tests. Almost everybody has been tested. So you know actually how many people got infected, and amongst them less, but okay, around 0.3% died in Germany. Whereas in other countries have not been as drastic in testing for every population. So what figure we have is just the tip of the iceberg. All you know, Italy may have the same number of cases as USA because not all patients who were symptomatic were tested. Similarly, in India, not all patients who are symptomatic are being tested. So what we are getting the figure may just be the tip of the iceberg. The number may be far bigger. But you know that morbidity is related to the age of the patient, to comorbidities which are there. And a lot of patients who get operated in the operation theaters have comorbidities, right? If you are doing elective surgeries, that's why you have to not go in for elective surgeries. You have to be safe for them. You only have to do any emergency surgery. The risks in an operation, where do the risks in a surgery lie? The risks in a surgery lie in the intubation, because that's aerosol generating. The risk in surgery lies when you use the electrocautery, right? The risk in a surgery lies if you use powered systems, powered drill, powered saw, etc. Otherwise, if you try to do minimally invasive surgery, if you are gentle, the risks in surgery are not as high, right? Whatever statistics we have in India don't matter right now because we just have a very small population who's got infected. The numbers are going to rise, right?
What is coming out of Dr. Chabra's statement is that we don't have a denominator. We don't know how many are actually infected to give a percentage, and hence some countries have a very high percentage of deaths because they've not tested more people. If you test more people, suddenly the percentage of people getting you know, deaths or mortality, it becomes lower. Isn't it? Isn't that what you're trying to say?
Yep.
I think you touched the correct.
So WHO states as the figure of 3.4% only as mortality, right?
So Chabra, what level of, Dr. Chabra, on two hands, I mean, let me take this forward. I mean, these statistics really are overwhelming. They only increase the panic and the fear among everyone here. For the sake of everyone, what are the level of preparedness that a hospital owner like you should be doing? And what is the level of preparedness an individual doctor should be following from here to at least start getting ready, like you said, start getting ready for the future to come? The corona may be staying here. We all know that. But how do we get ready to be at war with corona?
I think, Vishal, your last statement was what has the message. We have to be at war with corona. And war cannot be fought by the owner. War can't be fought by one general. We have to all get together to fight the war. So it can't be the doctor doing separately, the owner doing separately. We have to together have a strategy, and everybody needs to fall in place into the strategy. So everything needs to be taken into consideration, whether how do we may not be able to physically separate the patients, we can functionally separate the patients. We don't need to have separate buildings. We can have separate corridors, separate wards for COVID suspect patients. In India, the policy is that they are not encouraging the same hospitals to have COVID and non-COVID patients. And this they have learnt also from the Italian experience. But ultimately, if the numbers rise, they may need to forego this principle. But again, you can have COVID suspect patients. And what is the real danger is the stealth transmission, right? The patient may not have any symptoms, right? You have 30 to 40% asymptomatic patients who may still be causing infection to others. You also have the incubation period phase. So you have to have a separate area where any suspect patient needs to be admitted. There you have to treat them like COVID positive cases till they prove to be non-COVID. And no one test.
Yes, Dr. Chhabra,
it's interesting of this test is only 70%, right?
I think it's interesting to understand this. It's interesting to understand that on one hand, we have very limited number of tests available for this big population. On the other hand, we already have false negatives and a big incubation period. So all these challenges are only going to bring more and more asymptomatic, undetected, COVID-infested patients, which we will only be coming to us like a negative asymptomatic person. Let us hear from Dr. Gabriel. Gabriel, how has things changed in Singapore? How have you? We understand from all this discussion so far that we need all this. Unfortunately, this is something that is really resource intensive. On one hand, we are talking about conserving resources. On the other hand, we want to achieve this ideal situation. But most patients who will walk into our hospital will be the ones who are asymptomatic, who have no signs, symptoms, and also no test available with them. How do you at your center approach them?
Thanks again, Anand, for your kind invite, Michelle and Apei. And then before we carry on, I wanted to uptick on just now the mortality rate issues. In terms of the mortality rate, are we talking about the mortality, operative mortality for the COVID patients, or just general mortality of the COVID patient? If it's operating mortality, yes. If it's operating
mortality is the big debate. That mortality for a COVID positive patient who undergoes surgery, an orthopedic surgery.
Yeah, I think mortality for the general orthopedic surgery is a different subset of patients that probably yet to divide. And then, of course, they are already at risk of pulmonary damage and prolonged intubation and further positive pressure spreading the disease is going to be a problem. But the general mortality is really between 2 to 3% plus or minus. And the reason why they die is probably because the lung fail and maybe lack of a hospital supply in terms of ventilator to support them. This probably leading to the whole concept of actually what Dr. Chhabra was talking about, that really the country healthcare system capability of dealing with the COVID spread. I mean, it depends on whether how you flatten the curve, the COVID incident curve, to such a level that your hospital system are able to deal with what is yet to come. Now, if the hospital healthcare system realize you flatten the curve until so low that you have enough resources to deal with the unexpected second wave or the third wave of COVID attack, then you will be able to open up to do more elective cases. Before that, you still have to shut down for everything, as if what Dr. John Chen have talked about currently in the ministry. We are not allowed to do any elective surgery. We are only allowed to do only emergency surgery for that aspect, because we have to preserve the manpower, preserve the ward, and preserve the OT to convert it into ventilator for ICU for the patient who needs to be in the area. So, until, as we mentioned earlier on, we have herd immunity and vaccinations, then the whole concept of how flexible is the healthcare system to be able to deal with the second attack, the third attack. And Singapore is a good example. We started off strong, and now we are dealing with a second attack. And this second attack, daily, we have 300 cases. Yesterday, we have 400 cases. And today, we are expecting to have even more cases as we go in. What happened when those 20% of the infected case turn bad and need ICU care? Whether the hospital have capability to do this, that would depend on when you open up to do the elective surgery of a certain extent. Now, for those, when you need to do that, once you have flattened the curve, when we begin to deal with the new normal. So how do we screen for the patient? The key thing is testing, screening, and that is basically what Vishal has talked about. And then Professor Yang Hai is a really fortunate, have established they can actually have a CT scan outside the door, X-ray outside the door, and then test the patient negative first layer, and then screen the next patient in the isolation room, and then to have the swab test negative ×2, and then you enter into a whole dedicated building with COVID-free staff and personnel and patient, and then to do the electives. If you have that capability, then you are able to do the electives. Otherwise, for most of us who do not have that capability, we probably have to rely on a very different combination, as you mentioned. For example, the travel history, the contact history, and of course, once you have a positive or suspected, you need the PCR testing, which takes about 5 hours, and then the second PCR testing. And antibody testing, as one was mentioned about the IgM ELISA, takes about 5 to 6 days to get better, to find out whether they are positive or not. And before you will be able to do, to attest this is the right patient, that you are able to do the surgery. Similarly, apply to the clinic as well. Those are the group of people you will need to do that. Now, in the clinic situation, it's not going to be cost effective for you to do that. And therefore, most of us is probably going to invest on telemedicine. And then to build up your capability to do this, you probably discuss with the patients and then how to treat them. And then as a result, after you have done look at the symptoms, if the patient need an MRI, you send them to a dedicated facility to do the test, and you review the test, and then you will cut down on probably some of your circulation to that. So this is probably moving forward is what we're going to do.
Right, Dr. Srivastava.
Amita, maybe I can, Vishal, I can get Dr. Amita in here, because the whole debate is about an asymptomatic COVID patient undergoing an elective orthopedic surgery because he's in the window period. Dr. Amita, being a physician, can you tell us if the mortality truly will be higher if we've operated a COVID positive patient without knowing that he's COVID positive?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. The mortality will be definitely higher. So the thing is that these patients are asymptomatic carriers, and basically probably 3 to 4 days after the surgery, they are going to basically start getting the symptoms, and these patients have a high chance of going into cytokine storm, which is responsible for the mortality. So any patient of COVID who's also an asymptomatic carrier, any surgery he undergoes, the mortality is much higher. And therefore, all the more reason that any surgery which is seriously not life-saving should be definitely postponed. And this has to be spoken to with the patient and the family very clearly, that though the test is negative, you could be in the window period. There is a possibility that you're an asymptomatic carrier, in which case you have a higher chance of mortality.
So Dr. Amita,
sense to wait for that 1 week.
Dr. Amita, is the way forward is like Dr. Yong mentioned, that you do a swab or test one today, and after 7 days repeat again, and only then think about any surgery for them to avoid these false negatives?
Yeah, so that's a very good suggestion by him. But the thing is that in these 7 days, we have to make sure that the patient in no way comes in contact with anything by which he could get a new infection. For example, fomite is a very well-known way of catching an infection. So basically, if the patient is hospitalized, then we have to make sure that a separate stethoscope is kept for this patient, a separate blood pressure apparatus is kept for this patient, because there's also a possibility of the patient catching an infection during this time. Also, one other trick that we could utilize is that if the patient was at home, now there's no travel, so we assume that the patient has absolutely no history of travel. And at the same time, if the patient has no symptoms, everybody in the family is asymptomatic, and patient has not really come in contact with any fomites that he's handled, then we could assume that this patient would be asymptomatic,
And what are the tests that you recommend? Like if God forbid tomorrow we see a patient who's actually in pain and requires some kind of elective surgery. So what are the investigations to really ascertain and make sure that these false negatives also can be covered? Is HRCT really foolproof, or is it like 2 swabs distance apart?
According to me, most important is history. You have to get a very good history about the symptoms of the patient. A very important symptom I want to mention about is loss of smell and loss of taste. These 2 symptoms are extremely peculiar to COVID. Okay, so the patients of COVID may not be having fever, sore throat, running nose, but they may just complain of loss of smell and loss of taste. So please ask for these two history, because if these two histories are present, then they could be actually having COVID, and we may think they were asymptomatic carriers if we didn't ask for this history. Also, history of contact, anybody in the family is sick, etc. So that history is very important. Among the tests, I would say that we should do a swab. The swab has to be nasopharyngeal swab along with oropharyngeal swab, not only one swab, because the sensitivity of oropharyngeal swab, which is done at many places, is only 30 to 60%. Nasopharyngeal swab is better at 63 to 73%, and the simultaneous yield improves to about 80 to 85%. So we basically would recommend both the swabs are taken. Very important. There's a particular technique. So only those people who know how to take the swab should be taking the swab. Transportation has to be very important. So these things, and if the report comes negative, we have to basically talk to the patient that you could be in the window period, and ideally we need to repeat the swab 5 to 7 days later, and then we see if the patient could wait for 5 to 7 days, then you wait and take a swab again. But if the patient can't wait, and at the same time there's no history of anybody sick in the family, then you could probably go ahead. But HRCT, honestly, I'm absolutely not in favor for, because if the patient is asymptomatic, also if he's a carrier, patient could only have nasopharyngeal involvement because of COVID. So HRCT will become abnormal only when the patient has pneumonia. So over here, patient is asymptomatic, so HRCT will 85% be definitely negative. And a lot of people with a negative HRCT will like to assume that the patient doesn't have COVID, and therefore surgeons, residents, anesthetists, nurses, and ward boys will actually take less precautions, and we are predisposing our healthcare workers by giving this false sense of negativity. We're predisposing them more to getting infected.
Before we leave you, Dr. Amita, and move on to Dr. Srivastava for his preparedness, one last question. On one hand, we are saying that we are ready to do emergency surgeries, and we can do these emergency surgeries safely by using PPE as per the protocols. Then why can't we use the same protocols applicable to emergency surgeries in elective surgeries and still continue doing our work and still follow the same protocols of protection, safety, chain transmission breakage, and all those things?
Yeah, so again, Vishal, it's an excellent question, because we know COVID is going to go on for a long time. We are not seeing life becoming normal, at least for next 3 months. And we cannot basically be postponing elective surgeries, because they are also important, basically. If patient is in pain, he is in pain. If it's not life-threatening. So I basically feel that first we need to have our protocols absolutely in place. And then in that case, whichever hospital is going to start doing elective surgery, they still take every patient as a positive COVID. Please work out your special corridor to receive the patient, your special lift, your OTs, which are special COVID OTs with negative pressure if possible. If you can't make negative pressure OTs, then please make sure that your OT at least has 25 air exchanges per hour. Please make sure that your OT vent is not opening into the hospital, but it's opening separately to the outside. If at all you cannot do that, then at least put HEPA filters so that this COVID virus will get absolutely caught in the filter and will not go to the rest of the things. So please, in fact, I'm saying start preparing. Please start preparing, and we must start elective surgeries in 15 to 20 days. And we have the same protocol of going through our patients. But ortho patients can't be conserved for 3 months if they are in pain.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Amita, for a wonderful tip for everyone. I think this is one tip that, of course, it comes with a star added to it, but I'm sure we'll all can filter that star in coming days with much, much better and stringent protocols coming up. Dr. John Chen, you shared an article today with me about the experiences from Singapore, and JBG has also published about the importance of daycare spine surgeries happening, meniscal surgeries happening, ACL surgeries happening, epidural steroids happening in Singapore. Do you think we are already following these protocols? And if yes, what are those protocols that you are following at your institute?
So as we did have day surgery up until 2 weeks ago. We actually, before that, we already cut all our electives, and we had day surgeries. But up until 2 weeks ago, we stopped all day surgeries. Going forwards, when we come out of this very critical period, I think day surgery is the way to go for now, because reducing a hospital stay is important to reduce the burden on the hospital. But we can only do limited day surgery cases, not major deformity cases. I think going forwards is we have to look very closely at how we're going to screen our patients if the COVID is here to stay, what is the chance of it being endemic in asymptomatic patients? So only time will tell. So right now we are in a very difficult period, and we will see. Singapore is not one of the best countries right now. There are other countries are doing better than us, but our death rate has been pretty low, which is a good for us. Our ICUs are not being swarmed yet, but hopefully we don't get to the stage where it will be like Italy or New York City.
Right. Dr. Yong, are your OTs already working on the same protocol like Dr. Amita mentioned, negative pressures? Every single staff is into the type 3 PPE already with all them. Dr. Yong, your take on that? Like, we just want to ensure that no healthcare worker gets infected. Are these the only protocols to keep ourselves safe, or you are having some other experience?
Oh, we have a special hospital, those infectious disease hospital for treating the COVID patient. The protective gear is just like you're operating on the AIDS patients, and with the full protection, the gloves and so on, those kind of things. But in our hospital is in the negative pressure because all the patients, if they test positive or they suspect, the patient will be sent to the special hospital, not in the normal hospital. So we don't have extra protection for those non-diagnosis patients. But for the asymptomatic carrier, right now we are testing all the patients have surgery. So twice PCR to make sure they are not contaminated. And there has been a study showing that the virus, the highest amount virus is in the first week. It's about 7 days. So after 7 days, the patient come out symptom. Actually, the amount of the virus from the swabs are less than the first 7 days. So at this moment, we are operating on the same protocol, just like a month ago.
Right. I think these are just brought some ideas clear in our mind that the indications have to be really redefined. You also have to think whether it's really worth doing a surgery or not. Daycare surgery is something that you may think about. Elective surgeries are on the roll. However, the precautions are as like you're treating a COVID positive patient. Structural changes may really be required. Reducing contact not only with aerosols patients, but also having structural alterations in your OT to have all the recommendations that the physicians have just mentioned is on the call. And also the ideal would be to have an absolutely separate building, separate team of surgeons operating on COVID suspected versus COVID negative patients, 2 PCR spaced apart. And for any patient who's asymptomatic, try to do PCR, and HRCTs probably have at this point not proven to be taking care of patients who are asymptomatic. Dr. Srivastava, we are waiting for opening of lockdown on the 3rd May. And I'm sure you on a normal day, you see 600 patients in your OPD. Even if we say that we are going to see 1/3 of the patients, Dr. Chhabra, Dr. Srivastava, Dr. Goregaonkar, you're going to see not less than 150 to 200 patients in a day. Are you already prepared for that? I'm considering the best case scenario, we are only seeing 1/3 of the patients that you regularly see. How are you preparing your OPD areas, and what are your recommendations for all of us?
Sir, before answering any question, first let me congratulate you and all your team members to participate in this discussion, which is very vital at this moment. Now, it is very difficult to say that, yes, we are prepared because we don't know the future. It was rightly told that what we are seeing is the tip of the iceberg. We don't know how we are going to face the future and in what significant number of patients we are going to receive. But whatever the resources are there and whatever problem we imagine, we have to have a practical solution. You cannot deny that we cannot find, or we have to find whatever the situation is there. So actually the system has come into action. In KM also, we have this system now in place. Seeing the future also, we have started having the helpline, and there is a telecommunication with the patient. And these patients are being actually advised on phone. There are different specialties who are participating into it. And in the hospital, we have triage system. Now, what is going to benefit us in this time is the triage and physical isolation, because that is the thing which is there in our hands. So triage in KEM, we have three group of patients. One who is positive and symptomatic. The another is positive but asymptomatic, and third is suspected positive. So these are the three groups of patients we triage, and they are kept in different wards. Now, patients who are having symptoms, they are sent to Kasturba Hospital directly, though we also have set up for them also. Suppose there is a delay in the shifting, we have system to help. So these three group of patients we are having in three different wards. So if a patient who comes positive, he is separated immediately. The PSM department, they do actually the social connection of this patient to his family, friends, and wherever they have visited. So that is in place. And the patient who are suspected, unless their swab comes negative 2 times, they are not allowed to go. Once they become negative, then they are allowed to go in the different ward. Now, regarding surgery, now we must understand the surgery is also a stress. So I think in such orthopedic patients who are otherwise also quite old, try to treat with the conservative line of management, but sometimes it is emergency, one has to take with all precaution. And
right,
that
Dr.
I am referring to people.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, and it has been echoed again and again. Unless you have a swab negative, please don't rush into surgery. If surgery only emergency at this point in time. Dr. Chhabra, how are you preparing your OPDs to deal with such patients? Is there anything specific that you're going to come up with? And then we'll have Dr. Trikha, who's got some advices for OPD management protocol and workflow. Dr. Chhabra.
Yeah, one Vishal, we are still running our telemedicine. So I saw 15 patients today. I think the way to go is to look into the opportunity and look at, because if you are in the monotony of things, you do not innovate. So as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. I'm sure a lot of innovative ways will come out, how we will, and things will never be the same again. So what we intend to do other than telemedicine when the lockdown opens, one, I'm not too optimistic that Mumbai or Delhi will see an end to the lockdown on 3rd of May.
Someday it is going to happen. I'm sure lockdown is not.
Yeah, someday. Yeah.
All the hospitals will die down soon.
One, try to have all people come in, as many people as possible come in by appointments only. And when you give an appointment, have them fill up a form so that you can screen them through their history onto whether they are suspect cases or not. Right. So we will then also space the appointment such that people we can maintain the social distancing in the outpatients, and we'll need to limit the appointments initially, and we'll need to scatter them over the whole day so that we are able to maintain safe distancing. Of course, this screening will need to continue for a very long time through a thermal scanner. You need to see the temperature, and you need to have them give a self-declaration form, etc. But again, you need to maintain, the healthcare workers in the OPD will need to maintain precautions so that you are not exposed as much to what they call as the stealth transmission, because there may be asymptomatic cases or those in incubation period. So combination of telemedicine, appointments, taking patients as much by appointments as possible, and try to scatter them over the day, and try to reduce the number of follow-up appointments. So you can, whatever you can give an advice over a longer period, and you can see them more over mail or telemedicine rather than have them come again and again.
Yeah, I think every point weighs its own gravity, and it's proving the importance of every single point. The role of telemedicine, video consulting, follow-ups to be reduced, absolutely less physical contact, strictly by appointment, screening them with their history, and also triage of these patients. Dr. Trikha, Would you like to please sum up and help us understand what protocols? I've heard you talking about OPD protocols and workflow changes for consultation for the future. Can you please help us understand what better we can do to have our consultations on in the coming times?
Right. Thanks, Vishal. The thing which we need to understand is there's going to be different scenarios for people who are working in government hospitals, for the corporate hospitals, and for the nursing homes. The second thing which we need to understand is what we are talking of will be the contingency time, or when the crisis has gone and we are in a semi-cautious state. And the third thing is, which will all depend on, is whether the tests are available or not. So these are going to be three major concerns, and based on that only we are going to decide our protocols. It's going to be easier, I would say, for the nursing home people and for the people with smaller clinics to start back and go back to their OPDs and IPs, because they can definitely control and have a proper protocol set in place for the OPD patients to come in by appointments, have a screening done right at the gate, have a separate limit entry for the gate entry as well as for the exit, have a person with full PPE, one person who is taking care, measuring the temperature, filling up the forms as told by Dr. Chhabra, and then making sure that they enter after the screening. For the nursing home people, again, I would say that your registration counters and all need to be properly now. We were getting more and more interactive and as close physically as possible with the patients. But now we'll have to take a step back. We'll have to put in barriers, the physical barriers between the patient and the providers, which will be required, especially for all of us. Then I would say that in OPDs also, when we bring our appointments, the people who are there have to be 1 or 2 patients only who have to be having a physical distancing. I showed in one of other places that we need to have chairs. Let's say a small thing like chairs will have to be marked, that 2 chairs are going to be closed, and then a person can sit at least by 6 feet. So you mark the 2 chairs which are not to be used if they are together, or place your chairs accordingly. Don't put magazines. These are small things for the people who are going to be in nursing homes and things. Don't put magazines, don't put your glass tumblers for water or for tea or coffee. Use disposable things as much as possible. Put in hand rubs, put in alcohol things. So this will be for the private practitioners. For a big corporate hospital or for a person, especially for the government hospitals, like where the OPDs are in enormous situation, we already have started the telemedicine part. The telemedicine needs to be there, that you have some separate telephones which have been taken by the hospital who are taking care, because it's not a consultant centric in the government hospitals as much as in a corporate or in a private hospital. You need to have some telephones which will be where people are going to be getting that information. That information needs to be spread right now when we assume that the OPDs are going to be started, so that people know that if you have to enter this hospital, you need to get an appointment through this telephone. And that's what we need to do right now. This is a time for a retreat, taking stock of the situation so that we can come back with full force when the lockdown finishes and we can take care of this infection which is going to be there. Another thing which I would say is PPEs will have to be restricted, because come what may, we all know that we are going to have constraints of PPE. So we need to educate our own staff as well and mark out the areas which are going to be having a high risk, medium risk, and a low risk people, and get that information down percolated to each and our health personnel who are working in our hospitals. Because that's what which might create problems is when, as somebody said, that the people who are in low risk area will also want for the PPE. So a proper dissemination of information, which is very difficult in the present situation, is the critical thing which we should be doing right now during the lockdown period, making the people aware of what will be there later on so that they get a proper perspective of what we are dealing with. Post pre-30th May or pre-1st of March is now a utopia or an idealistic society for us. And what we will be assuming after 3rd of May is going to be as near normal as we can hope for and think and dream of those things. So we need to understand that we all as a government as well as the practitioners will have to increase our fund allocation for protection, for physical distancing, for putting in telemedicine, for putting in online communication, information technologies into our hospitals, private nursing homes, government places, and also for the personal protective equipment for the health personnel. We need to increase our health allocation, funds allocation at every places wherever where health is getting provided. I think these things will be very important.
I think social distancing, like very rightly mentioned, Dr. Trikha has rightly mentioned that social distancing is going to be the key. It is going to stay here. Even when the lockdown is gone, Corona is not going to be gone. It's a long, long war. We have to win this war only after winning multiple set of battles that are going to come our way. And one very important part of winning this battle is social distancing. And we will have to have major behavioral changes for future, unless we have these changes, not only structurally in our OPDs, in our wards, in our OTs. Workflow has to change. The workplace changes will have to be implemented. Information dissemination has to start. Teleconferencing is the future. Video consultation, reducing physical contact, more follow-ups on video. I think this is something that is absolutely important. PPE is going to be handy. However, misuse is something that we all have to prevent. Let me just call upon now Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen, what kind of safety gears have you been using in your wards during rounds, in your OPD while you're sitting there? Is there always a PPE when you're in OPD? Is there always a PPE when you're in a ward, or it's only a mask that is enough for you?
Yes, so we now insist on patients who come to a hospital to wear a mask. We wear a mask as well, but we don't have the same level of PPE as in Beijing. We don't use the goggles when we see patients in our clinics, but we have screening as the patients come into hospital, so we reduce the number of patients quite significantly in our clinics as for now. So we have not used the PPE just for ordinary clinics, but when we have a high-risk patient with fever or with suspected COVID, yes, we do use the full PPE.
Right, Professor Ignacio, in your ward rounds, do you depend only on face shield and masks? And if yes, what kind of mask do you regularly use? Is it N95, PP2, or what kind of protection do you use during your rounds? And does it really step up when you're doing a surgery, emergency surgery for patients who are COVID negative? What I'm asking is, if a COVID negative patient is supposed to be undergoing an emergency surgery, where you have done a swab, it has come out negative, is it still important to go in with PPE, or it's just a mask is important?
We don't rely, well, actually, I don't rely too much on the labs. I look at the clinical picture because I've done surgery on patients who was initially negative and turned out later on to be positive. So I always level up. Making rounds, actually, we go outside, look at the chart, call the patient, and explain to the patient that I might not see you in person. And I ask about the symptoms, etc. And if I see the X-ray and it's not something urgent, then I just do telephone round. And unless I have to see, then I do at least an N95 and gloves, and I don't come into contact with the patient unless really needed. In the COVID wards, as much as possible, we do not enter the rooms of the patient if possible.
Right. Dr. Brijendra is here with us from UK. Dr. Brijendra, welcome. May I also call you upon on this? What is the level of safety when you are managing these patients in your OPD and your wards and your OT for a COVID negative patient? Is it always, I mean, is it always like the highest possible PPE that you would wear, irrespective of the test that this patient has? Your voice, Dr. Brijendra.
If I just go back, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I had to go for a meeting. Essentially, touching what on Vivek just alluded, that this is not going to go away very quickly. So we do need to be careful how much PPE we end up using. And it's vital that we actually guard that rather than getting somebody else to tell us what to do and what not to do. Now, if we're doing an outpatient, so the way we've been working at my place is because we have got an appointment system, it makes it a bit easier I guess, for us to work. So all the elective new patients have been cancelled. The follow-up elective patients, we go through the list and say that these patients are going to come back for, we have a telephone consultation. Now, the fracture clinic patients, again, I will go through the list a week in advance at least. and decide which patients A needs to come back for a face-to-face follow-up. Now, for face-to-face in outpatients, most patients are actually quite sensible that they won't come if they've got any symptoms of cough, cold, or fever. So in our outpatients, what we're using is gloves, a face mask, and a gel if required, and try and keep a 2-meter distance. So we've got larger rooms, so the patient stays at a distance, and only examine as necessary. Make the movement of the patient least as possible. So for example, if a patient needs a change of plaster, then when the patient attends the plaster room, we would just go there and see the patient at that time rather than the patient having to move around in different parts. So that's for the outpatient.
Right.
On the ward, we're lucky enough, because it's a big institute, big hospital, we have what we call as a COVID ward and a non-COVID ward. So once you go into a COVID ward, then yes, you get the full kit, full PPE. In the non-COVID ward, the current guidance is what we follow from the government is use of mask and glove and plastic apron, not the full.
Right. Thank you, Dr.
And Dr. Goregaonkar, maybe Vishal, let's get Dr. Goregaonkar into this, because he represents a municipal hospital in Bombay which caters to many thousand patients on a given day. Sir, do you think this is relevant, or is it possible to be implemented in a setup like the Lokmanya Tilak Municipal Medical College?
Extremely difficult. What is happening is, at this stage, we are fighting only with the acute part of COVID. We are just trying to find out which patient to how to segregate and how to keep and how to differentiate among them. So in OPD at this stage, if you see, patients, they come in a bulk. We have reduced the OPD at this stage. Normally what we see 400 to 500 patients, we are gone to about say 100, 150 patients now. But protective gears are not utilized by everybody at this stage. Also the patient, whatever you tell them, distancing, social distancing, they will not, some of them will manage, some of them will not follow all that. And therefore the risk of getting a transmission of this infection is very high in these patients. They may transfer not only to us, but patient to patient also transfer is very high. In a private setup, you can have your own method of screening as it was discussed. And at the same time, we have to find out, because in a OPD, if you get a crowd, then it's a big trouble, because again, you cannot maintain a social distancing. Even when you examine the patient, then what happens? Do we use all the PPE, or whether we use only the mask and the gloves, that's all? So these few things are need to find out.
Yeah, Dr. Goregaonkar, your concern is very, very valid, that for a private nursing home owner who's going to examine a patient, and for a government hospital guy who's going to see multitude of patients in his OPD where crowding is inevitable. Let us get upon Dr. Praveen Amin, who's going to join us today now. Dr. Amin, what level of PPE and at what places? Can you please tell us in OPD, in OT, in ward, during examination? And I'm talking specifically about patients who are unknown to us in terms of COVID status, whether they are positive or negative, they are asymptomatic, unknown patients. What level of PPE should we undertake? Like an individual doctor, what should I do?
Hi, Vishal. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm stuck in hospital with some sick patients. So you'll have to excuse me for joining.
We wish and pray and hope, sir, you continue doing service while keeping safety in your mind for yourself.
Yeah. See, it all depends. The degree of concern or degree of infectivity depends on the amount of aerosol generation there is. So clearly asymptomatic patients are ones who do not have symptoms. So effectively, you need to have some degree of protection in terms of clothes that you wear. You wear a plastic apron. You need to have goggles on your this thing. And if you're in a high area, a hot spot, now the government has recognized various areas of hot spots. So if you are in a hot spot area, you should consider most of the patients coming in as potentially positive patients. So in those situations, you would wear an N95 mask, you would wear a goggles, and you would wear a plastic apron. If it is aerosol generating, for example, you are in the operation theater where you need to intubate the patient, where you need to, any kind of, we avoid using nebulization in our patients in the ICU. So all those aerosol generating things needs much more higher degree of PPE. You're talking about face shields, you're talking about N95 mask, and you're really talking about an extra skin by the PPEs that you have. So the donning and doffing in those group of patients need to be extremely vigilant, and you need to be wearing very appropriate PPEs for that. If a person is not coughing and, if you maintain a distance of about a meter or two from a patient, then, even a regular mask, a surgical mask is good enough. So it again all depends on what kind of patients you are seeing. If you're in an OPD where you're going to look at patients with fever and things like that, then the PPEs are much, much more. So your fever clinic, the area of triage, the ER, these are areas where the flow of patients in a hot zone would be much higher. So you need to have proper PPEs for that. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Praveen, we can hear you,
Yeah.
Praveen.
Correct. So that's in short the degree of PPEs that you need to have.
Right. The question right now, once again, was that if a IT fracture comes to the ward in a COVID negative status, would you take him through a safe corridor, or would you just put him into the before you came in, we were discussing about entry level buildings, about buffer buildings, and about sterile buildings in the hospital in a setup like China.
Okay.
How would you do this in, say, Bombay Hospital?
See, you're talking about these entry points where there are, these paths of things which you have. That's really not shown to be that beneficial, because if you're going to sterilize somebody's clothes and things like that when they walk through these tunnels, so-called tunnels, I'm not sure that's going to protect you. If somebody is coughing, or somebody is bringing out some phlegm and sputum, these are the patients who are potentially likely to spread. And asymptomatic people, again, the maximum, if somebody breathes, he can, at the expiration, you can go up to about a meter. So if you're going to look at asymptomatic patients, the percentage of asymptomatic people who are likely to come is about 20% of the general population of positive patients. So you got a small percentage of 20%. And even if you do a swab of these patients, the pickup of in positive patients is about 60% from the nasopharyngeal, and from the oropharyngeal is about 30%. So even if you get a patient who's negative with the swab, you're still not sure that he may be an asymptomatic carrier, because the productivity of your test there are so many flaws in the sensitivity of your test. So
yes,
I would think
Dr.
that
Amita, can we get you in here? We want to know about masks. Is the N95 the only mask that can protect you, and is there a role for other levels of masks in different settings?
Okay, so actually the thing is that we are talking about a virus. The size of this virus is 0.1 micron. So we need to understand that we need very good masks. So N95 mask gives us a protection up to 99%. A triple layer surgical mask gives us protection up to 75%. And a cloth mask gives us protection up to 67%. So this is a correct, proper data that we have. I'm extremely happy that in our country, the guidelines are given by AIMS, that every healthcare worker, whether working in COVID or non-COVID zone, today should be wearing N95, because we have a lot of asymptomatic carriers. And I think this is a brilliant step forward, because I personally feel that a lot of societies in the world are holding back advising N95 only because they are in shortage. I'm extremely happy that our government at least has put its foot down and has announced that this is the best, so that we know that if it's possible, each of us and all the healthcare workers should be wearing N95. One other reason for this is that we ourselves could be asymptomatic carriers and we could be spreading infection also. So if we are wearing N95 mask, then the chance of spreading infection by us to the other person reduces by 75%, which is a very, very important point. Whereas a triple layer surgical mask prevents the risk of transmission by us by only 50% and a cloth mask by 40%. So basically, I would say that everybody who's a healthcare worker ideally must wear N95. And the other thing is that we know route of entry are eyes, nose, and the mouth. And therefore, eye protection is extremely important, which I personally feel that a lot of people are forgetting about. So either wear goggles or have a shield, or basically just a glass barrier between the secretary and the patient, and have a system by which, there could be some recording by which they can communicate with each other. So this is something
Right,
which
thank
is
you.
important.
Yes.
Dr.
Gabriel,
Abhay, can I add some? There are two more categories of masks. There are FFP2 and FFP3, which is seen in the European world. The FFP3 is probably better than the N95. That's, it can be debated, but FFP3 has a much higher degree of filtration. But needless to say, if you're going to wear a mask, you need to have what is called as a fit test. And the fit test is very important to see that there is no leakage, and you really need to have a properly fitting mask. And again, it's a question about having all healthcare wearers, workers to wear N95 mask is not practical. Let's be very clear about that. And you don't need it in areas which you do not have. So if you say all healthcare workers need N95 mask, it is not a practical thing. You're going into zones in the hospital which are, where there's high degree of aerosol generation. I would say N95 mask is very important. All ICUs where you're dealing with patients, you need to wear N95 mask. If you're going into the theater, you need to wear N95. Remember that when you wear the N95 mask with the tight fit that is, you tend to get sores in your nose and nostril. So if you're going to be putting it on for 10 hours, 12 hours, it is not practical. It is clearly not practical. And the duration of the sensitivity of that is every 4 to 6 hours, you need to change it if you extend more than 6 hours. Some people say after 4 hours, you need to change the mask. So there are many issues about the mask.
Dr. Amita, quick reaction to this before we move to Dr. Gabriel.
I'm talking about scientific data. So N95 mask can be worn up to 8 hours without using effectivity. After wearing it for 8 hours, you need to change it. That's number one. Second, I'm talking about guidelines. We have guidelines for our country which says healthcare workers should be wearing N95. So what I'm trying to say is that what is the best, we should know, try to make it available, because this is going to go on for a longer time. So the thing is, when I know that N95 has better protection to myself, and I'm also preventing it from transmitting to somebody else, why should I rather have some marks on my face. Though I'm a woman, I'm not bothered about having marks on my face, but I don't want to be COVID. And I don't want to be.
Great. It's good to know that it's not only orthopedic surgeons who don't disagree with each other all the time. Gabriel, can we have you here?
Dr. Abhay, before we move on to Dr. Gabriel, I'll also want to understand about the standardization. There are plenty of different type of gowns available for PPE for surgeons like us. There are these jumpsuit gowns, one-piece ones, and then there are these different type of gowns available. What is the standardization measure? How should we understand that this is the one that we should be using in OPD, this is the one we should be using in OT? How do we really understand which is the one to be worn? In India, we have at least 10 different shapes and sizes of these PPEs available.
Okay, so can I just answer that?
Yes,
so,
please.
Yeah, so if you're going to be in the OT, or if you're going to be in an area which is aerosol producing, in that case, things could be falling on any part of your body. So basically the thing is that you want to wear something which is going to completely cover you, including have a balaclava also. So the thing is that you require plastic things which are impermeable so that they will not enter into your body also. So when you are in the OT, when you are in the ICU where you're going to be intubating or doing aerosolization, etc., then you should be having these plastic jumper suits which are covering right from your feet up to the neck, completely covering it. But you don't require this when you're sitting in the OPD seeing the patients. So in the OPD, you could be just wearing, like I had told last time also, the minute you enter your hospital, change into scrubs. Please remove your clothes, change into hospital scrubs, and over there have a gown. Please have gloves, have N95 mask, and have glasses, And a cap also would be good, because otherwise it could be entering your hair, and some people have a habit of touching their hair like I have. So this would be good for OPD. But in the OT, in the ICU, aerosol producing things, you require a full jumper suit, or I mean a suit which is going to cover everything right from neck below up to the toes, including your
Yes,
shoe
thank you.
cover.
Thank you. Gabriel, I'm coming back to you because yesterday we had a heated debate about are spine surgeons now changing their, or orthopedic surgeons, are they changing their indication for surgery? Are we now going to be conserving many more patients than we were conserving before? What are your thoughts on this looking forward?
I think looking forward is really depending on the resources that you have and the capability of how you test those COVID-free patients. So as all the previous speakers talked about, how do you screen various different screen? How do you ensure that your patient is the virus-free one? And then what type of case you would do? Doing the surgery is really depending on the extremes. And then currently the patient that we're facing is usually like a bell curve, but asymmetrical. On one end is those absolute indications, fracture, tumors, infections, rapidly progressing myelopathy. Those are for sure you have to do something. On the other shape of the curve is the one that is severe deformity, a lot of pain, but yet utilize a lot of resources. And they might stay in the hospital for many days and use up your OR room for many hours. So these are the other ones that you may need to do, but yet you need to think about it. But majority of the bell shape in the center is the group of patients that are 1 level TLIF or maybe 2 level TLIFs. And then they might have pain, yes, the EHL is grade 4 weakness, but it's not really foot drop or anything. Then they can wait a little bit. So in that aspect, I think what we will be calling for is creating a triage scoring system. And then so that people can then utilize to objectively grade the patient. Because what happened is that your patient in your healthcare system will keep on calling you, pressurizing you to do the surgery. And then how do you select which patient to do the surgery? Is it because it's private patient you do the surgery, or it is actually the patient who actually have enough points that you will need the surgery? So we are in the process of setting this type of scoring system, particularly using one of the domain is hospital capability or resources, and hopefully we will share with you probably in the next 1 to 2 weeks' time.
Right. Dr. Praveen, I mean, can we get you back on? At the end of the tunnel, do you think the light is herd immunity, or do you think the light is a vaccine? What do you think is going to save us from a total disaster?
See, I think all in all, we got to take everything into consideration. If you look at how a pandemic unfolds over the year, over time, like we saw that in the SARS epidemic, in recent epidemics when we saw SARS and the H1N1 and the H1N1, how it went about. Initially, you see a large amount of patients who have a huge number of problems, begin to understand the disease, how it unfolds, what is the pathophysiology of the disease, and you get to understand that. So over time, we know that now that about 80% of the patients may have mild symptoms or asymptomatic. Remaining 20% may end up into hospital. This is from all the countries that we've seen in the world. So what happens over time? As more and more people are exposed, there will be immunity in the community. So you will see that the flattening of the curve that we so-called call is because of the immunity developing. And we need to, at this point of time, we realize that the best way of actually flattening the curve is having the social distancing, and hope that as people get more and more immunity. Now it's about once you reach about 50 to 60% of the population who get the disease and recover from it, they are the ones who will then, because they go out in the community, and when the viruses are exposed to these people who are immune to this, automatically you will find that the disease process starts to come down. And it will be, of course, we are not looking, phase 1 trials are going on the vaccine. We don't see a vaccine coming not coming before September, maybe even by the beginning of next year. So that is something which is in the pipeline. I mean, we're not going to see that immediately. when the vaccine comes, like in the H1N1, when the vaccine came, automatically the episodes of the H1N1 influenza came down. Now, when you compare to the H1N1, the mortality there was about 0.1% when they actually looked at the whole total community as such. This is public data, where now you look at the when you compare this to the COVID, they're predicting that it's going to be about 0.6%. So it's a little, about 5 times more than the conventional H1N1 flu. So in that context, when over time you will find that this will start to decrease. And that's because both of herd immunity, and once the vaccine is available, you will find that this disease will quickly disappear.
Right, Vishal, go ahead.
I think it's something that we all are dreaming about. Rapid and quick testing measures where we can really test on our patients and get results in a couple of hours time. Also availability of vaccine, some very wonderful prophylactic measures. And I hope and wish and pray that the treatment also becomes predefined and protocol based, where many more patients who are infected will start getting better. Now, when we move on from here, being an orthopedician, I always get greedy about surgery.
Vishal, can I come in for a minute? Vishal?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Now, when we are talking about testing, now, we feel that we are not testing enough. This is what people are saying. But look at the UK data. They have tested more than 150,000 people, and the patients who are positive were about 15,000. Okay. So effectively, 10 to 12% of tested patients turned out to be positive. So, you got to look at a situation, because this is a dynamic process. You test it once, you may need to test it 2-3 times before you get it positive. So there are many flaws in the testing methodology.
Yes. In fact, Dr. Praveen, Dr. Yong was absolutely mentioning this, that they have some tests where 6 hours results are available, and we really pray if we can have such tests available.
Vishal, can I just talk about a new test? Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, the thing is that we have Gene Expert for TB. All of you all are aware of it. So basically, the thing is that Gilead has taken out Gene Expert cartridges for COVID. So actually, unfortunately, they were not giving it to any other country, but probably because we've given HCQs to US, so they have actually given their Gilead kits of Gene Expert of COVID are available. They will be now reaching our country 18th of April. So basically, training has already started in 4 government centers. So from 18th of April, government centers are starting COVID by Gene Expert cartridge. And there are 4 labs in the country which are going to be given this. Hinduja is one of them. We have Thyrocare, SRL, etc. So they will be giving it after some time. So the advantage now becomes is that the result is available in 45 minutes flat. That is number 1. You can run 4 tests together continuously. So the thing is that, unlike the RT-PCR with the swab that we have currently, at best, they are running 2 or 3 batches. So though the result comes out in 4 hours, they normally give results to us in 12 to 24 hours. But with the Gene Expert kits coming in, the results will be given out actually every 4 hours. The test takes only 45 minutes. And what is really good is that entire thing is a cartridge system. So the chance of infection to healthcare workers also goes away, because you put the sample in the cartridge and everything is automated. So 18th of April is a big day for us. We are starting in the
right. I think this is exactly we are all dreaming about, because this is the whole scene will change the minute we have rapid testing measures, better prophylaxis, vaccine available, and of course treatment, which is far-sighted measure here. Now coming to a little more practical scenarios, being orthopedicians, Dr. Gabriel, let me have your word on that, Dr. Gabriel. We are looking at a situation where today we are all doing emergency surgeries. Now, what I am trying to understand is, if a patient with tibia fracture comes to you, or a femur fracture comes to you, where a definite treatment of conservative treatment, non-surgical measure is as good as a surgical measure also. Are we really looking at a time when we have started redefining our indications? Are we really looking at surgeries only when it is life-threatening we intervene? Or no, we can still think about semi-urgent surgeries also coming up in future?
I think this is a good question and a difficult question. I think based on, I think nobody would know, and then based on, it's really depending on what is your hospital resources is going to be, and also your country resource at which stage you're dealing with the COVID spike or the offset line.
Let me just give you a preview. On one hand, we have 600 plus medical colleges in our country. On the other hand, still they are dealing with only 20% of orthopedic elective work, and 80% still happens in smaller nursing homes in a country like India.
Yeah, so coming on to that, I mean, following the argument that I mentioned about if the first stage of your healthcare system is at that stage you're battling with the outbreak of the COVID, you need the resources to treat the people who is dying because they have no ventilator. So do only what is minimal. Once your country is ready to be able to, is under control, you can start doing semi-elective cases. Then the questions that of whether you're treating in the patient with a tibia fracture with a long cast or actually putting a tibial nail, and then you need to discuss with the patients. Ideally, for convenience, for faster recovery, that your patient, probably the surgery would be a good part, but it is a shared decision process. I think that is most in line with most of the medical legal advice in terms of treatment options. The patient has to come and make a decision together with you after you have given the patient the advantage and disadvantage in regards to that aspect. That is in a semi-elective type of situation, as opposed to the country is dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak, that you need the resource and you can only do what is needed.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Dr. Ignacio, who decides whether surgery is really required or not in your setup? Is it a multidisciplinary team, a panel of orthopedic consultants, or no, a patient who's admitted under you only decide whether surgery is required or not?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that in the private hospital where it's more difficult to say who gets surgery or not, we have just a small group of senior members to decide. So the patient's history, the X-ray, the comorbids, etc., are brought about, and this group of very few people will decide if there is any need to get additional consultation. The heads of the subsections are being consulted as well. That is to remove the pressure from the chairman in making the decision. In the government hospital, it's easier for us to decide because it's more communal, the decision making. We follow strict guidelines, but in private setting, it's a bit more difficult. So we have that committee to decide on that.
Right. Dr. Ignacio, thank you so much on this. May I call upon Dr. Gautam? Dr. Gautam Chakravarti is with us. Dr. Gautam, what is the way of your team deciding on the indications? Have you seen that the decision making has evolved over a period of weeks during this crisis, or you have been doing the same kind of work, same level of work? Dr. Gautam Chakravarti. I think Dr. Gautam is not with us. May I just ask this same question to Dr. Brijendra? Dr. Brijendra, are you there with us? Dr. Brijendra?
Yeah.
No, John, would you like to take up that question, please? How have you evolved over indications of surgery and the type of work that you used to do before Corona and current scenario, and what is your plan for the future ahead? How the decision making, has it been changing or is it the same now?
Well, for the last 2-3 months, we've just been doing urgent surgery, urgent surgery that is patients with acute choroid equina, severe cervical myopathy, infections, metastatic tumors, and spine trauma. We've not done any elective surgery like spinal fusions for spinal stenosis or deformity. But having said that, I've got this patient in the ward now. We've been postponed for 3 months, severe spinal deformity and back pain. I just can't think of a good reason not to do surgery for her. But again, my administrators and my hospital department are looking at us and wondering why we're doing spinal fusion surgery. So I think after this COVID, I don't know when it'll be, maybe another 2-3 months. I just like to say that the COVID virus is very tricky virus. It's very dangerous, and don't underestimate it. It can come back at the turn of a hat. So be very careful if you're going to upgrade your surgeries. you have to be absolutely certain that you don't have it, COVID, at the back.
Yes. Thank you, John. I'd like to ask a common question to Dr. Yonghai and Dr. Srivastava to get two perspectives. If a young lady with acute cervical radiculopathy and biceps weakness comes to your clinic, Yonghai, how will you deal with it? What will be your plan? And then Dr. Srivastava, what would be your plan?
I'm sorry, would you please repeat the question, please?
A young lady with a large acute cervical disc with a biceps weakness on the dominant hand, how would you treat her in today's circumstances?
In our hospital in Beijing, we are just doing the regular thing, and probably some patient will choose percutaneous radio frequency, or we will do a posterior endoscopic decompression of the disc, and just pretty normal thing.
So do business as usual. No, you won't be extra conservative and delay surgery or push surgery forward.
Right.
Yeah, Dr. Srivastava, what do you think you would do if this lady walked into your clinic?
Yeah. So in this case, otherwise also we try to treat these cases conservatively because it's a first episode, acute episode, and there is some deficit. So here also, I will be demonstrating how to apply traction, and she will purchase one cervical traction. She will apply at home, and maybe she will contact me on phone. How does she doing with the medication which I'll be giving to her? So there is no question of taking her to any either minor theater or major theater to even give the injection. There is no question of that. So just conservative line of management is to be continued, but she should be informed that if suppose the deficit is increasing, then she must call and inform us.
Right. Dr. Chabra, can we have you here in as a specialist as well as an administrator? Can you speak wearing two hats? Wearing the hat of a surgeon, do you think you're now become far more conservative in, especially in the indication of pain, because spine surgeons largely deal with quality of life and not life-saving surgeries. On the other hand, as an administrator, do you see this as a significant loss to the hospital's economics? Dr. Chabra?
I am even otherwise known as a conservative surgeon, so I would always try conservatively before, and then only if the patient needs it, then we go in for a surgery if they fail conservative treatment. I would not tend to agree that if you have a good conservative trial, it undermines your economy, because ultimately in the long run, you tend to then get more patients who tend to have faith in yourself. So, but opinions differ, but both as an administrator and as a surgeon, we propagate here that people practice as per protocols, accepted standards of care. So, of course, we don't have an accepted protocol for conservative management of a disc prolapse across the globe, but people differ in that. But in the situation of a pandemic, right, during the lockdown, you would tend to be more conservative, because you don't, we are going to enter into that curve subsequently where we will be flooded with patients, like Italy, like Spain, where people, you don't have hospital beds to accommodate them. So you don't want the beds occupied by something which can be managed conservatively with the patient at home. So you want to maintain your resources and your beds accordingly. Meanwhile, till such time, if the patient comes in an emergency, you can you need to operate upon the emergency cases. But till such time, even you can do daycare surgeries, but you need to treat them as COVID cases, and you need to have all precautions when you operate. One of the other things which has not been probably touched upon, Abhay, I will quickly want to say is, we've been talking about social distancing and physical distancing. One of the very important things to be considered is also temporal distancing, temporal separation, because you have to have teams in the hospital, and you need to separate them temporarily. So, because otherwise, if you don't do that, you may have most of your doctors getting sick and nobody available to run the show. So you have to have teams, and then generally people who are in COVID, who are managing COVID cases, they say you need to be on a duty for 7 days and then have 14 days off. Whereas those managing non-COVID cases, you have to be there for a few days, but then you need to be off for 7 days so that if you have any symptoms, they get recognizable, and there's another team coming. Fortunately, the turnover reduces, so you have to break in teams. The entire hospital and non-essential staff don't need to come to the hospital.
Right, and maybe Dr. Yonghai, you can come in here. As a guy, as a senior surgeon, do you see the relevance of your OT presence becoming less and less? Do you think we're going to start segregating over 60 surgeons, keeping them out of the front lines? Do you think that's going to happen?
Or the contrary, on the contrary, because the surgery has to be finished very quickly, is it that in Singapore now more senior surgeons are operating and the junior surgeons are going on the back seat? Dr. Gabriel.
Can I make a point? I mean, talking about the indications of the surgery, perhaps I didn't make myself clear. I think right at the beginning is depending on your hospital resources. If you don't have the resource, you have to be conservative. You have to do minimal, do whatever you can. The second thing is that if you have the resources, then you're talking about those surgery. The principle of doing the surgery is not really do more or do less to a certain extent. Is whether the surgery is warranted to be done. In a situation like just now, Apei was talking about a patient have a C5 palsy with a large PID. Is it a nerve root problem? Is it a radiculopathy problem, first time attack, or is it chronic cervical myelopathy problems? So obviously the prognosis of the patient is different. And therefore, assuming it is a myelopathy problem and the patient has significant weakness over that area, then the question is that if the hospital you have the resources, then you should discuss with the patient that you should want to do the surgery. If it is a radiculopathy problem, yes, ideally, if the patient is a pianist, is a surgeon, then you should really do early surgery to avoid the failure for conservative treatment. Then you can. This is a discussion that ethically and then medical legal wise you have to share with the patient, and then to make a joint informed consensus, and then decided to move forward to do the surgery or not. So I think in terms of A is the capability of whether the facility is allowed. And then the second thing is that the indication of the surgery. Is it absolutely you have to do the surgery and do a good job for that surgery? Then you should. Or those surgery who is the patient can wait, and then there's other treatment alternative to buy time or to try to treat the patient. These are some of the things. And finally, the patient and the surgeon have to have a common understanding and an informed shared decision making to avoid future medical legal problems.
Right. And Gabriel, is it that the seniors are operating more to keep the surgeries short, sweet, and smooth, or juniors are still in there? What is going to happen to the training, learning?
It has, if the deficit is severe, then you have to go in for surgery. I thought Abhay said that there is some deficit, not severe deficit. So those you could have an option for a conservative treatment.
Right. If it's severe deficit, yes, there is.
I think the message here conveyed by Dr. Chhabra and Dr. Gabriel is very, very clear. We are what needs to be done. At the same time, time is going to ripe here that we will have to redefine the indications for surgery. Wherever you can wait, you may want to wait rather than jump in. At this point, the Dr. Chhabra, the question is, it is said that you would want to minimize the surgical time. All the critical care guys are wanting the surgeries to last as small as possible, least open as possible. So is it that the senior guys are coming in more to keep the surgeries short and sweet, or the senior guys are now worried that they are 60 plus, have some comorbidities, so they may not want to step into the OT? Dr. Chhabra? Dr. Gabriel, would you like to take that question, please?
Yeah. So
I didn't hear you.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Dr. Chhabra, are you with us?
Yeah, I temporarily I was temporarily disconnected. So,
So
what
the
was the
question
question?
was, going forward, do you foresee the senior people? When we mean senior, we mean over 65 surgeons. Do you see them getting into OT more often to finish surgeries in a short span, so there's no mentorship and teaching and fellows training happening? Or do you see them being kept out of theater because they're a higher risk population?
See, during the pandemic, then we in our hospital have suggested to people over 60 years of age not to come to the hospital, because that's also an advice from the government. So, but in the long run, as the pandemic settles, I think we will find our own ways to carry on with life as normal and carry on with teaching as normal. I think till such time that we find a cure or a vaccine for this disease, things will be different. But sure, at some point down the line, things will normalize, and this will be like one of the diseases, like tuberculosis also, right? You have a lot of people dying from tuberculosis and probably as much dying from it. But I think in the long run, things will get back to normal.
Right. While Dr. Amita is answering very good answers on the chat, Dr. Praveen Amin, can we get you in here? If I'm a surgeon who's gone and attended a few days of emergent OTA, and I come back home and I experience fever, what are the immediate steps you'd advise me as a healthcare, as a spine surgeon? You're muted.
That's a question that will probably keep coming up, because all fevers are not necessarily COVID. You could get a viral fever from any other cause. But in this day and time, if you've been operating on patients and somebody in your group has turned positive, or even one of your associate, because the spread to healthcare workers is about 20% in when you look at the Italian data. So any symptoms of fever, sore throat, cough, in diarrhea, all of these symptoms which fit in with the viral infection, I would first get my counts done. If my counts and procalcitonin levels are low, I would probably take a swab, for the COVID-19 and isolate myself. And till my report comes negative, not go back to work.
Yes, Vishal, go ahead.
So last question here, Dr. Amin. So just in case if a patient while evaluation turns out positive, does that mean that he should be deferred from surgery considering the complication rates and the safety of the healthcare worker?
Absolutely, no question about it. Unless it's an emergency surgery, which is life-threatening, and you need to do some life-threatening surgeries. There are some, not necessarily in orthopedics, but if you have somebody who's got impending paraplegia, a quadriplegia, you would like to operate on these patients. And if possible, wherever, use regional anesthesia. If not, then you will have to take all the precautions that is needed for an emergency surgery with proper PPEs.
And just in case we have to defer the surgery, how long should, like for example, if there is a patient who was COVID positive 2 weeks ago and now has developed some problem, so is he fit for surgery within 4 weeks span, 8 weeks span, or 3 months he should not be touched at all?
So let me give you a profile of how this illness takes. This is unlike all other viruses, as somebody did mention that most viruses last for 4 to 5 days. It doesn't extend beyond that. But this COVID-19 viruses has lasted, people who get symptomatic last as much as 2 to 3 weeks. So effectively, the effect of the virus, people have had low-grade fever for up to 3 weeks. So you obviously, as I said, we need to wait for the antibody test. As the antibody starts rising in your body, it takes about 4 to 8 days for the viral cultures to become negative. So effectively, your RT-PCR may take 28 days to go away. That doesn't mean you're necessarily infective, but we always take precaution till the RT-PCR becomes negative, we don't discharge patients, or if we discharge them, they're supposed to be quarantined. As per the government law, you need to have 2 negative swabs before you can discharge them, and even after you discharge them, you're supposed to be quarantined at home for 14 days when those patients who are positive. So effectively, I don't think you should talk about surgery for at least a month. As I said, if there is an emergency,
Dr. Gabriel, you had a
there is
word
no.
on that, Dr. Gabriel. I think message is very clearly taken. COVID positively differ at least for 6 weeks. Dr. Gabriel, yes, please come in.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with you. If it is, again, it's going to be, depending on the merit of the cases. And then if there is an absolute need, is a patient is going to be spinal metastasis fracture, is going to be paralyzed. The patient should at least, if it's COVID positive, the patient at least, or suspected, or at least the patient need to know what are they going for. So it's the same scenario that you have. Do you do surgery on a patient who have angioplasty just done within 3 months? Whether surely the patient will have high risk, yes, but the patient should be involved in the discussion as well. And then depending on the merit of the disease, I think while we can make a lot of decisions for our patients, but I think involving the patient for the discussion and the family understanding the situation to make a joint decision is a key for a good healthcare for management of the patients.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. Last but not the least question, Dr. Trika. Dr. Trika, would you like to come in? Dr. Trika, please. Dr. Trika, if in my OPD there is a positive patient who has come up, what should be done as the next step? I mean, after having noted that one of my patients has turned positive and has visited me, is it that I can continue doing my OPD later, or
In the present scenario in India, you will be quarantined, and you need to be in self-quarantine for the next 14 days and wait for the results and for your symptoms to come up. If within 5-7 days you are having some symptoms, then you can be tested, or even after 5 to 7 days, you can get a test done for that. It is advisable. Remember, we are in strange situations right now, which we haven't seen till date. So better to be cautious, ensure that we are using protectional PPE, masks at least, triple ply, or if possible N95 whenever we are seeing, and face-to-face interactions with our patients.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Trika. One last but not the least question. You come from a government setup, AIIMS. We have another 2 very, very senior guys, Dr. Goregaonkar and Dr. Srivastava with us. We have Dr. Chhabra with us, who again comes from a semi-private kind of setup. Financial burden, how are you looking at? You all are salaried. What are you looking at? We have heard from various parts of the country that the employed surgeons are taking less salary. Private surgeons are actually earning nothing for coming 6 months. What are you seeing at, and what is the financial burden that we all as healthcare workers are going to see for ourselves?
Tremendous, that's for sure, but I hope it is going to be for a short time only, and that's where the government and the other things have to come in and give some stimulus to everyone, like it has been done in US. That's what I feel, that the government will come up with a package for everybody, because this is a situation which is once in a century or a millennium for us in the present economic time. So it has to come up. We all are facing it. And more importantly, after the lockdown finishes, we will have to give some funds to our own setups to improve or change our engineering styles or our interactions with the people and the patient. So our funds will be diverted towards more protection, which we have to anticipate now and start. So we will be having some fund allocations in a different way. So some package will be there, and we all will have to take away pay cuts as much as possible, which we can bear with, and make sure at least that our lower positions of the people are able to get the things working with us.
Yeah. Right. Dr. Chhabra, how do you see the financial burden coming up? While on one hand, we all want to restore services, we all want to maintain things, reduce losses. On the other hand, we are told that we cannot resume work like it seems for another 3 to 6 months. How are we going to proceed from here? Like the biggest at risk, like we just mentioned at the beginning, are the guys who are independent, nursing home owners, single doctor-owned clinics. How do you see a future for them from here? I think we just lost Dr. Chabra. Dr. Chabra, are you there with us?
Maybe Dr. Srivastav can answer this question and then we can
Yes.
start
Yeah.
wondering.
So can I answer this, Vishal?
Please, sir.
Yeah. So our country is known for unity, and all the difficult times we have passed with victory. So it is not the first thing, in the past, if you remember, our past Prime Minister, Lal Bahadur Shastri, has told the nation that you keep a fast for one day so that we not have to ask for grains. Okay. So here also we can actually, give our salary to the government to fight together. So this also would, encourage other people also to come forward and help the country. I think there is no harm in, leaving your salary for 1 or 1.5 months, or maybe part of the salary.
Right. I think it's going to be a tough time ahead, and we are all going to see a very different world altogether. Before we go to the closing comments from Dr. Ram sir, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists here for sparing their time. Dr. Gabriel, Dr. Jan Chen, Dr. Ignacio, Dr. Yongwai. They have had a busy day all throughout the day, and they are here with us for last 2.5 hours, even before the session started. I really thank you from Bombay Spine Society and from the whole ASSI and Bombay Orthopedic Society for joining us and giving us wonderful comments and inputs in here. I'm sure the experiences that you have shared are going to only make us better in times of crisis to fight this pandemic here. And I'm hopeful that our country will have better learning lessons to be followed in a less hardened way that you have seen. I would also like to thank the Indian panelists, Dr. Srivastava, Dr. Goregaonkar.
Maybe we are losing Vishal, but on his behalf and on the behalf of everyone, we'd like to thank the Indian panelists, Dr. Trikar, Dr. Goregaonkar, Dr. S.K. Srivastav, Dr. Chabra. You've been wonderful. Just to give a note before I hand over proceedings to our chair, Dr. Ramchanda, that part 3 of this session, which will be essentially coming from our allied helpers, which is allied branches, Dr. Praveen Amin, Dr. Amita Nene, etc., telling us about intricacies of the medical aspect of COVID. We're going to run that session on Saturday, which is going to be titled All You Need to Know About COVID as an Orthopedic Surgeon. And you can look out for that announcement coming up very soon. Until then, I'll pass over proceedings to Dr. Ramchanda.
Thank you, guys. You all have all contributed in a very big way to not only informing us, but also intriguing us and inspiring us to work in the right direction. We still don't have answers to many questions. We are going through a very dynamic situation. We don't know how things are going to unfold over the next few days or weeks. And what happens in the next few days or weeks is what's going to decide what's going to happen in the next few months and years. So we are not very sure. But one thing is there for sure, that we are extremely positive. We are driven in the right direction. And I would like to quote something based on a Nobel Peace Prize winner in 1922 by the name of Fridtjof Nansen. This Norwegian explorer had single-handedly saved almost 500,000 people in World War II. And what he said rings a bell. He said, the difficult is what takes a little time. The impossible is what takes a little longer. So whether you say the present situation is difficult or impossible, this too shall pass. So remain positive as far as your attitude is concerned, but as far as your COVID status is concerned, please stay safe and stay negative. God bless you. Take care.
Ram, hi. Very well concluded. Awesome.
Thank you.
Hello.
Super session.
well.
Thank you for having me. Hi. It was great having y'all around me, and it was good. Thanks. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Amita.
Bye.
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 Signing off.
Bye. Take
Bye.
Hey,
care.
Amita, this is Samir. Hi, Amita, this is Samir.
Where are you? I can't see you.
He's hiding his face.
Yeah, I'm not in a video mode possible.
Okay,
One
I'll
second, let
video
me switch it
call you
on.
then. I'll video
But
call you.
I
Quickly
Quickly
get
wear
ready.
clothes.
Quickly get ready. You have to look your best when you talk to me.
Amita, who's that rascal behind you?
I keep on piling on wherever I go.
Who's that rascal behind you?
Currently, I'm single.
hey,
How are you?
Good,
Bye.
good.
How are you?
Bye.
Thank you,
Okay,
everybody.
bye.
Thank you, Dr. Saraf. Thank you, Dr. Amin. Thank you, Professor Ignacio. So nice to connect to you in Philippines. Very nice. Dr. Srivastav, Dr. Goregaonkar, thank you. Thank you very much. Stay healthy. You are the guys who are fighting it. Arvind, you are right in Dharavi. So all the best. Take care.
थैंक यू सर
सराफ साहब, सब कुछ ठीक है बिहार में?
बिल्कुल ठीक है सर बिल्कुल
प्रणाम सर, प्रणाम सर.
Okay, I'm going now. I have to do a consultation. Sorry. Bye.
All the best.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you. See
You also
sir.
take care.
Hi, Ranjit.
Chest physician,
All good.
chest physician needs extra care.
I know you're right, with all of us actually, so then love will keep us alive, actually. Okay.
Great.
Bye. Yeah. Bye.
Bye, bye. Take